Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mumey, owner of the Celebration Bar Review.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to episode 135 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mumey. Really pleased to have you with us. Hope you're having a great day wherever you might be. As this episode is being released, we are just finishing up the February 2017 bar exams, and so congratulations to all of you who've completed your exams in the last week. I know that's a huge accomplishment regardless of what the ultimate outcome is. Just getting there, getting through it, surviving it, that's really a great thing. And in today's episode, I'm going to be recapping from the exams in Florida, California, the uniform bar exam, and a little bit about the multistate. So we've got some other states beyond that, but we're going to just talk about Florida, California, UBE, and multistate today. And so if you took the exam in any of those areas or you took the multistate, I hope you'll stick around with us for that information. Now, for those of you who are going to be taking your bar exams in July of 2017, or perhaps sometime in 2018, we're really glad you're with us as well. We've got a lot of information to share with you in the upcoming weeks and months about your bar exam. And of course, we have a lot of episodes that we've done about the bar in the past years. And we do this podcast once a week, releasing typically late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. And if you're not a subscriber to the podcast, really encourage you to do that. You can do it by going to Apple iTunes or iHeartRadio or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Or you can just go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com. There is a link for podcasts, and on that link you'll see all of our prior episodes along with all of the show notes for every episode that we've done. So I invite you to check that out. Now, one other special invitation I want to make to those of you that have not yet taken the bar, or perhaps there are some of you that took the exam last week and you just know in your heart that things did not go well, and I feel very badly for you if that was the situation. But either way, I want to invite you to a special live masterclass that I'll be holding on Thursday, March 9th at 3 p.m. Eastern, that's 12 noon Pacific. The title of the masterclass is How to Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. This is a look at the 4 powerful steps guaranteed to help you pass. And it's information that we've shared with people for a number of years now with great success, and I hope that you'll participate and check this out for yourself. I think you'll find it invaluable as you get underway with your studies, or maybe if you're just thinking about reviewing and getting ready for the next exam. The live masterclass is completely free, but you do need to register, and you can do that in a couple of ways. You can go to our website at celebrationbarreview.com. You'll see on the front page there's a link to the live class. You can also text your registration to the number 33444 and just text in the phrase next bar exam, all one word, next bar exam, to 33444, and we'll get you registered that way. Now, if you don't want to wait until March 9th or that time doesn't work for you, we also have an on-demand version of the same information from our web page, that's celebrationbarreview.com front page. Just scroll down a little bit further. You'll see the link for the on-demand version. Go ahead and click on that, and you can schedule the time to watch the webinar and the masterclass on your own. The only real difference is that in the live masterclass, I'm answering questions. So I always say the magic happens live, but if you really want this information and you just can't wait till the 9th, I understand. Go ahead and schedule it at your own convenience. But either way, I do hope you'll join us for this class. We're going to look at how to make the next bar exam your last bar exam. Well, today what I wanted to do, as I said, was to talk about the Florida exam, the California exam, the uniform bar exam, and the multi-state exam. That covers well over half of the country, and we have a little bit of feedback from our students as they came out of those tests last week, and I wanted to share that with you. Now, just a word of, I guess, apology in a sense. I took this episode from the live Q&A webinars that I do with our registered students each week. If you're registered in the Celebration Bar Review course, we do a weekly live webinar, and I take questions from students and respond. And I went through these four exams during that webinar on Friday, and I wanted to share that. And so it's a little rougher than a typical podcast episode would be. I think the sound quality is just fine, but there's a few more gaps and breaks and pauses because it's happening live. And I hope that you'll put up with that while we go through. But these webinars that we do for our registered students are really popular, and it's a great opportunity for me to interact with all of our students every week. So I hope that you'll enjoy this excerpt from that part of last Friday's webinar on the bar exams themselves. So without any further introduction from me, let's go ahead and jump in to today's episode, and let's look at a recap of the February 2017 exams in Florida, California, the Uniform Bar Exam, and the Multistate. Okay, so let's begin by talking about what was on the Florida essay questions and the subject matter there. First of all, the topics on the exam, the essay exam, the first question was a Florida con law question with a little bit of torts. Now, there was some thought that maybe it was federal con law, but the call of the question itself explicitly says, prepare a legal memo discussing the following under the Florida Constitution and Florida law. So that's how we know it's Florida law. It was a problem revolving around a charter county and charter propositions and disputes between charter officials, a sheriff, and the mayor. And then the tort piece had to do with claims against a newspaper for libel, and then claims of the newspaper against the county for restricting information. So it was not Homestead. It was not, it was not federal con law. It was Florida con law with a little bit of torts. That was essay question number one. Essay question number two in Florida was in fact a property question. However, it had a wonderful sentence right in the first paragraph. This is not homestead property. Oh, I love seeing that. So it was not a homestead question, but it was one of those crazy property questions in which you've got this nutty transaction that goes on. I'll just read to you a paragraph of it, just to give you a sense. Even if you didn't take Florida, I think you'll appreciate this. Here's what happens. The woman owns property. She gives the property to two adult sons, and the deed states that the brothers take the property with a right of survivorship. And without one son's knowledge of consent, the other one gets a loan from a third party and pledges the property as collateral, but then fails to make several payments, dies before the loan is paid off. First party says he'll foreclose if the second party doesn't repay the loan, but the second party refuses. And then he deeds the property to his niece for life, and then to Tom, and then to a local charity in equal shares. And it just goes on and on and on. Anyway, point is, if you didn't literally write it out on a sheet of paper, you probably got lost on this question. It was nutty in that regard, but it was not really hard. You just had to work through sort of the steps that were there. Then, as Florida likes to do, they put an ethics call of the question in, asking for any ethical issues arising from the attorney's conduct. So this was the first ethics crossover of the day. Property with ethics, that was question two. Then question number three was a trust question with a little bit of family law. We have a husband and wife, and we actually have two different trusts. And the question has to do with the validity of these trusts and whether or not third parties can get to them. And it's one of the trusts is a credit company trying to recover a balance owed on the wife's loan. That's pretty straightforward trust law. But then the other had to do with paternity and trust assets for child support, which gets us into some family law, domestic relations, as well as trust law. So there was a little bit of a crossover there. I think the examiners will say it was family law as well. And then there was an ethics crossover as well. Ethical questions representing the mother and the credit union in their respective claims, two third-party beneficiaries or two third parties. So we had two ethics crossovers in Florida, as well as the rather typical trust problem. Was it a valid trust? Two trusts, each one valid. Then were they spendthrift trusts? Could they be reached? So those are the essays. And I have to say, when I think about those and look at those relative to some trust essays I've seen in Florida over the years, this wasn't bad. I didn't think any of these three questions were really bad. I will say that the property question, there was one other weird part about it. I think it had to do with a tax deed. Yeah, it had a tax deed in it and a tax certificate. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. Okay, Then multiple choice questions in Florida, as always, civil and criminal procedure. Evidence was the second topic, and business entities was the third. So no great surprises there. That's what we got in Florida. Next about the UBE. Now, the UBE, Uniform Bar Exam, gives the same 6 essays and the same 2 performance tests all across the country. So if you took a UBE in New York, or you took it in Missouri, or you took it in South Carolina, or you took it in Hawaii, you took the same exam. Having said that, I've asked a few students to tell me what they thought the topics were, and I've gotten a fair amount of information. Here's what I saw, or what I'm being told were the 6 essays. And again, remember, I've not seen these questions yet, so I'm just going based on what you all are telling me. One of the, and I don't have any particular order of these, but I think the first essay, it appears, was contracts. We have a non-merchants, UCC versus common law. Sounds like a pretty straightforward contracts problem, and not a lot of comment about that. So that was question number 1. Question number 2 was corporations, having to deal with shareholder inspection rights and board fiduciary duties. So I would think that that is also pretty standard corporate law. Question number 3 was an agency question having to do with an agency's duty of obedience and an undisclosed principle. There were apparently 3 different contracts that were talked about, but they all revolved around agency relationships. So what I'm hearing is it was not another contracts question, which would make sense. It was an agency question just in that context. Question number 4 was a real property question having to do with landlord-tenant. It was a lease termination, the rights, waivers, and damages. So again, I would think that that's pretty standard, pretty straight up stuff for real property. Question 5 was family law. Common law versus a legal marriage, dealt with legal parents' rights and a division of property. Now, I do have this, and those of you that took the UBE might want to comment on this. I do have some comments that perhaps there was a conflict of law portion of this question, and that would make sense to me. Conflicts of law is not a separate testable subject, but it is a crossover subject, and this would be a good place that it would be if we have one of those parties in the family law question in one state versus another. We might have a conflict of law if we're not talking about uniform jurisdiction and enforcement. So if that's correct, sounds like family law with a crossover with conflicts. And then wills and trusts was the last question. And this was dealing with specific trust terms and rights under a statute. And this was apparently in conflict with a will that was written and the actual terms of the will. That's about all I know about that question. If anybody's got anything they want to add. Typically, those kinds of questions give people difficulty only because they see wills and trusts. It sounds to me like if you were interpreting the trust and the will and they were in conflict, then you had to do some work to figure out which one prevailed. All right, so that's the 6 essays that would be on the multi-state essay exam for the uniform bar, so the UBE. Okay, so then 2 performance tests in the UBE. We had the first question was apparently some sort of a legal ethics conflict memo, and apparently it was pretty similar as one of the practice MPTs. Fairly long question, but not terribly difficult. The other MPT was a persuasive proposal, persuasive writing with facts and conclusions of law in a guardianship trial. And you were reading through trial testimony and then doing a persuasive document. So I think we had an objective document and a persuasive document. It looks to me like both of those were to legal audiences. But again, I've not seen them, so that's just based on the information that you all have given me. Well, one of the questions I did get during the week had to do with how the scoring is done on the UBE. Now, that is a really loaded question because this is one of the key things that's really tough for people to understand. The UBE is exactly the same test everywhere. It's made up of those 6 essay questions and the 2 performance tests and the multi-state bar. So if you're taking the exam in 2017, that's exactly what you're going to get in a UBE jurisdiction. What's different about the UBE is that every jurisdiction grades and scores it separately, okay? And so that grading and scoring is what we want to talk about here. Now, the question that we got, I think, was from a New York student, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the question was, how do the MPTs affect the essay scoring? The student says, I had difficulties with one essay in particular, ran out of time on another. Now, I'm not sure if they're saying I had difficulty with MPT or with an essay, but in any event, I want to give you the grading in New York, but I want to be clear that this is New York's grading standard. This would not be the grading standard necessarily in any other UBE jurisdiction. So you've got to go to your own jurisdiction, look at the grading for that one. But because we have primarily New York UBE students, I thought that would be the one to talk about. So here's what happens. And I'm quoting from the examiners now. The scaled score for each of the 6 essay questions and the 2 performance test questions in New York are arrived at by converting the raw score for each question to a scale that runs between 20 and 80, and 50 is the mean. So it's a 100-point scale, but they score from 20 to 80. 50 is considered the mean. The candidates' essay scores are totaled, so over the 6 essays, and then divided by 6, so you get an average. The 2 MPT scores are totaled and divided by 2, so there's an average for that. And the resulting scores are then added together to arrive at an average scaled score for the written section. So there's an overall score for the Tuesday part of the exam. In comparing or in computing the average scaled score, the multi-state essays are weighted for 60%, and the performance test is weighted 40%. So there's your answer. 60% goes to the essays of your written score, 40% goes to the performance test. Then that average score is converted to a scored distribution that's comparable to that of the MBE, which means 0 to 200 points. And that figure is the candidate's total written score. Makes so much sense, doesn't it? Anyway, that's what you're dealing with. I would strongly suggest that you look at your own bar state scoring information, usually on their website. That's the New York system. It is not the system that they're necessarily using in New Jersey or DC or in anywhere else, okay? But that's New York. So hopefully that will cover that question. In California, we have 2, for those of you that don't know, California does 6 essays, 2 3-hour performance tests, but this is the last time they're doing that. The structure changes, but here's what we've got. All right, first day of the California test, the essays, wills, had a little bit of community property, perhaps. We had a testator survived by a spouse. So I don't know if it's going to be wills alone or wills/community property. Second essay was a straight up remedies question dealing in both torts and contracts, but it was remedies. And that's interesting because typically in California, it's really a torts question, tort remedy or contract remedy. But here it sounds like it was actually more remedies with just a little bit of torts and contracts both thrown in. And then the third essay was in evidence, and it was the federal rules of evidence rather than the California rules of evidence. So that was also kind of an interesting switch. They've been typically testing the California rules. On the second day of essay testing, the final 3 essays, there was a business entities question dealing with a closely held corporation. There was essay number 5 was ethics, professional responsibility. That's no surprise. That's a pretty standard topic on that exam. And then the final essay was in criminal law. It was Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, Miranda rights, and entrapment. Well, we could put that one in the museum. It's probably a relic. I'm not sure we'll ever be able to test those things the same way again. That's just my political thought. But nonetheless, that's what we had, a Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, Miranda, entrapment question. I'm looking forward very much to reading that question and seeing what the results were. As far as the performance tests went, again, there were 2 of those. The first one on day 1 was a letter to a party opponent. This was someone from the Department of Education. And apparently you were supposed to prepare a reply to a letter received from an attorney representing a nursing association demanding that the DOE rescind a legal advisory allowing personnel to administer insulin shots to students with diabetes. So there you go. So sounds like you're writing to a legal audience and a persuasive document. That would be my thought. And then the last performance test of all time, the last 3-hour performance test in California, was a legal memorandum regarding potential quantum merit lawsuit against a city. So sounds like, again, a legal audience, but now an objective task. So pretty standard as far as that goes. I would say, and I don't know if we've got California folks that want to chime in on this, but probably the only thing that I had heard from people was whether or not that Will's question had community property in it. Some people saw that, some people did not. I just have no way of knowing at this point how significant that was. It may have been one small part of the question. I don't think it was more than that, but that is one question. Everything else seemed to be pretty straightforward and single subject, which is nice in California. So MBE. There were a lot of comments about the MBE. I particularly like the one, I don't remember who said this. They said that they were sure they were reading one of the experimental evaluation questions. It was so weird they used their bra size to answer. I've been puzzling about that for 2 whole days, trying to figure out how, we're not going there. In any event, there were apparently some weird questions. There are always weird questions on the multi-state. There were probably more weird questions this time because they had 25 to play around with. So the multi-state is the multi-state. I will share with you a great story. Someone wrote me from the Colorado exam, which is UBE. And the student said that the morning of the multi-state, she's sitting in her car outside the testing center. And it's the multi-state day, and she looks over to the other car, and there's a guy, and he's got a bong, and he's smoking the bong before the MBE. I don't know. Only in Colorado, I suppose. But there you go. So the multi-state apparently was the multi-state. I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I haven't gotten anything that tells me, and there's nothing that's being said generally in the world out there. We just know that there were more questions, and that probably that we know don't count. But beyond that, nothing else there. Well, that's our episode for today. Thanks, everybody, for being with me. I hope that we've given you some useful information about those exams. In upcoming episodes, we'll be talking about Texas and Georgia and some other information, as well as beginning to focus on the upcoming tests in July 2017. So be sure to stick with us for all of that information. And again, if you want to go back and check out any of the older episodes, you can do that by going to celebrationbarreview.com, clicking on the podcast link, and you'll see all of the prior episodes and the show notes. And of course, we invite you to give us your honest rating and review on iTunes and to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. Well, that's it for now. I'll see you again next week. And as always, look forward to seeing you on the pass list.
Thanks for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.